I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end.
The Four Horsemen, England and her immediate neighbours really overachieved in the trauma department during the 17th century. The Wars of the Three Kingdoms in the 1640s slew around 5% of the population, proportionally worse than the Great War, and that's before counting the families and communities destroyed. The execution of Charles I in 1649 brought everything to a head. What followed was military rule under Oliver Cromwell, the man often accused of banning Christmas. In truth, he didn't cancel it. He just wanted to keep it pure and free from gluttony and gift-giving. Maybe he had a point. The restoration of the monarchy in 1660 brought royal razzmatazz and revenge on the regicides, but the decade quickly reminded people that it's a bad idea to get too comfortable. In 1665, plague killed tens of thousands, especially in London, where plague carts, red crosses on doors, and the smell of death made social distancing seem like a great idea. Those who could fled to the countryside. Those who couldn't stayed put and hoped for the best. Just a year later, fire cut a swathe through the city, creating what diarist John Evelyn described as a dismal desert. The phoenix of modern London rose from the ashes, but very slowly. By 1685, England was still not herself in body, mind, or spirit. Loyalty to the monarch was a fragile thing. Politics was shaped by the grudges of war, and ordinary people lived with the constant fear that stability could vanish overnight. Rumours and conspiracy theories travelled fast, and if those rumours happened to involve Catholics, all the better. It made them so much easier to believe.
Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum,
The Catholic menace. To say it wasn't easy being an English Catholic in the 1600s is somewhat of an understatement. Making up around 2% of the population, they were a marginalised minority. Public worship, banned. Holding public office, barred. Applications to serve as officers in the army and navy, binned. Unless an English Catholic could persuade people that they were an Anglican, they could not expect to go to university in England or vote in elections. The Test Acts of the 1670s made it impossible for Catholics to become members of Parliament, among other things. Why so much hate, I hear you asking? Well, how far do you want to go back? It is possible to trace the hate back to Henry VIII, but let's stick to the 17th century. The terrorism of the Gunpowder Plot, accusations that Charles I was a proto-papist, and denunciations of French Catholics by Huguenot refugees finding safety in England all helped to fuel anti-Catholic hysteria. The Popish Plot of 1678, which Charles II always suspected was fake news, was widely believed and led to the execution of at least 22 innocent English Catholics. In reality, it had all been fabricated by charlatans Titus Oates and Israel Tong. Now let's throw the heir to the throne into the mix. James, Duke of York was, shock, horror, a Roman Catholic. Officially, he had converted in the late 1660s. This led to questions about whether he should be excluded from acceding to the throne. More of this later. What very few people knew is that Charles II died a Roman Catholic. The news should not have come as a surprise. Both had spent their formative years with their Roman Catholic mother in Roman Catholic France. Charles II just played the PR game far better than his brother. Foreign affairs. First and foremost, it is important to name-check Louis XIV. He is the longest reigning monarch in history, 72 years, and casts a very long shadow over 17th century Europe. Leaders of other countries had to strike a delicate balancing act between placating Louis XIV and avoiding coming under the direct influence of the Sun King's France. The English may have loathed him as a Roman Catholic and absolutist ruler, but Charles II was more savvy. The Treaty of Dover, signed in 1670, brought England much-needed money. In return, Louis XIV could expect support from England against Protestant enemies, namely the Dutch. Some questioned Charles II's rationale for not supporting Protestant states. Little did they know what had happened behind the scenes. The Anglo-Dutch War of the 1650s was so good that two sequels followed, one in the 1660s and one in the 1670s. Peace was never made in good faith, but Charles II's young niece, Princess Mary, was betrothed to the young Dutch prince, William of Orange. Remember this name, he will become very important in the story of James II. Away from Europe, Britannia was very much starting to rule the waves. Her navy was the envy of Europe and helped her to expand her interests around the world. Inevitably, this brought England into direct competition and conflict with other countries. The Dutch Republic was a major global competitor, hence the wars, while France was expanding its sphere of influence in the Caribbean and Canada. Spain was no longer the heavyweight it had been, but still controlled much of Central and South America. Bandits and horse thieves. The history of party politics in England is complex, but a significant milestone was the exclusion crisis of 1679 to 1681. Tories and Whigs emerged as divergent parties who clearly stood for different things. The Tories supported the hereditary right to the throne and defended the authority of the Anglican Church and the monarch. They supported James, Duke of York. The Whigs feared absolutism and wanted greater parliamentary power and a Protestant succession. They wanted to exclude James from the throne. Given a boost by the hysteria surrounding the Popish plot, the Whigs believed that they would exclude James from the succession. The exclusion crisis dragged on, so Charles II exercised his royal prerogative and dissolved Parliament.
You're fired.
He wanted to protect his brother and take political momentum away from the Whigs. There would be no Parliament for 4 years. When re-elected in 1685, the Tories were in the driver's seat.
Victory.
The Whigs were left plotting against James. It is important to mention that the Tories supported James because he was the rightful heir. They did not support his Roman Catholicism. It is also important to mention that party politics guarantees an opposition. These two factors would collide to cause problems for James II.
If you haven't quit his problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a snitch ain't one.
99 problems. Charles II was certainly a monarch who liked to make merry. While his wife, Catherine of Braganza, did her best to produce an heir, Charles tended to dally elsewhere. He never found his wife attractive physically, but he grew to appreciate her as a person and defended her from public criticism. He played his part in siring an heir, but the couple suffered 3 miscarriages and no legitimate heir was forthcoming. Illegitimate heirs were everywhere, however. Charles II fathered at least 16 illegitimate children. To his credit, he was not just a baby father. He made sure that his children were provided for, with titles, money, and recognition. The problem was that none of these children were legitimate, so none of them could succeed to the throne. That did not stop one of them, James Scott, the Duke of Monmouth, from claiming that he should be king. He was Protestant, charismatic, had support from the Whigs, and swore that his parents, Charles II and Lucy Walter, had been married before Charles ever met Catherine of Braganza. If only he could secure enough support, from England and abroad, he could usurp the throne from his uncle. Summary. So much in late 17th century England was affected by virulent anti-Catholicism. Politics polarised around it, and fake news was fuelled by it. England was still grieving as a nation, grieving for all that had been lost to war and plague and fire. Catholics were easy scapegoats. How would the English have reacted if they knew of Charles II's secret treaty with Louis XIV? What would have happened if he had been as transparent about his own Catholic sympathies as his brother? How different would the course of English history have been if Charles and Catherine had had a child who survived? All hypothetical, of course, but worth mulling over. Charles II was a populist and a pragmatist. He was the right king for a country which was still riven by suspicion and instability. Whether he was a good king is very much up for debate. It is too easy to look at James II and assume that he must have been a bad king because he was deposed, but maybe he tried to do his best with an unwilling and unwinnable country.